We're on. We are on.
All right. Fantastic. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Just Two Dads. We're laughing about it because we live in the world of technological glitches and challenges, but we overcome them every week. We do a little bit better. I'm fired up, you guys. I'm excited about this week's show. First of all, it is Wednesday, November 4th. So I'm just going to talk about the elephant in the room. All right. I know we're all.
Did you say elephant?
The elephant in the room. Oh gosh, yeah, right. Politically, right. Got political, and the donkey. I guess the elephant and the donkey. In the room. I guess I don't know. So the election has not been resolved, right? From what I can tell at the moment, still unresolved. And so, but as we were talking about, is a lot of there's an energy in the air right now that there's kind of a lack of a foundation. People don't know. By the way, it's interesting to hear all of the conversation that was happening before the election. And my thought, I got very centered and grounded. I kept thinking, like, the more we think that the world is going to change, a lot of it is going to be exactly the same. And so really it's just how we adjust and how we figure our way in the new paradigm, whatever that looks like. I don't think that this matched anybody's expectations, how this election has gone. And so it's going to be interesting. But because we're energetic beings, I'm so excited about today's guest, because today's guest lives in that world of energy and transformation. And we're gonna hear from Susanna today. And so without further ado, just going to get right into it. First of all, before I introduce you, Susanna, I just want to say, Shawn, I love you, and I'm glad that we do this in partnership together.
Thank you so much.
Because I know who you are, the essence of who you are, and I love you, and I love being in doing this with you. So
I appreciate that. That means everything. Especially because, we have a lot of work ahead of us once these results are tabulated for the election, and it does not matter who you voted for. If your candidate wins, you can't afford to gloat. And if your candidate loses, you can't afford to hate. You can be disappointed. And so what happens is, one, there's a job at hand to unite people around you as much as possible and search for what we have in common as though our lives depend on it, because they do. What depends on it is the life that we have, the life that we want, not necessarily the one that we have right now with all this turmoil and everything. And keeping in theme with, making the most out of our time on the planet and our time to each other and everything, as you were about to do there, and introduce everyone to Susanna Peace Lovell and just thank her for being here. And, as parents to children with special needs, I have never even thought of the concept of someone being a life coach for special needs families. So if you can tell us a little bit about what that means, but how you arrived at it, and tell us a little bit about your amazing story, and welcome today.
Well, first of all, yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm actually glad that we're able to have this conversation today on November 4th, because it reminds me that we just keep moving forward with our purpose, no matter what, right? So everything could be chaos around us. Certainly as parents, specifically, even as special needs parents, we're always sort of used to new paradigms and new normals at sort of like every stage of the game. And so we just have to flow and stay connected to our purpose and in alignment with who we are and so on and so forth. So yes, I'm so happy to be here. My name is Susanna Peace Lovell, and I am a life coach for special needs families, but this is also my lived experience every single day, as I am I feel like today's show should be called Just Two Dads and One Mom. Can we do that for today?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Just two dads and one mom.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I feel like necessity is the mother of invention. Is that what we say? So I, in the same sort of, line of thinking, like I believe that we are here to teach what we most need to learn. And so as a mother raising a daughter who has myriad special needs and challenges, and we'll get into that shortly. She is now 14. But she had, challenges day one. The second she was born, she commanded lots of attention for various reasons, health, otherwise, medical, all kinds of stuff. And so I was on this journey trying to, number one, figure out who my child was. Number two, have people tell me who my child was, but that not sort of sitting well with me necessarily. And number three, just trying to learn how to be a mother. I mean, she was my first child and everything was new to me. And so as this journey sort of moved forward into understanding all of her needs, which were quite great, I remembered thinking, okay, so then for sure I should just completely forget about myself, forget about me, because I have this child now who requires so much assistance and help in sort of every aspect of her life, above and beyond just, being a newborn, of course, and sure, needing me for life. So I, eventually, along the way, couple years in, 5 years, 6 years, 7, I just remember thinking like, okay, but there still has to be something for me in this life, because I am miserable, number one, super stressed out. My marriage was failing. There's so many things happening, on this, in my life that I just remembered saying out loud one day, like, okay, but I just want to be happy. And I want to live a thriving life. And even though I have this child that I was not expecting to have and have no idea how to raise and take care of, I want to have a thriving, beautiful relationship with her, however that's going to look. And I want to find purpose in my life and live a life full of passion and joy, period. And really, basically, I just wanted to be happy, because I was so unhappy, so debilitatingly miserable all the time.
Wow.
All the time.
But isn't that what, like, I think every adult, like every human being, that's what they ultimately try to find, happiness, right? Where it's the elusive, right? It's the elusive feeling like, how do we, I'm doing what I thought I was supposed to do, and I'm still not happy, and in many ways not fulfilled. And so how do we bring those concepts? And so, and by the way, your daughter, she's the only child you have? She's your only child?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. And yes. And so what did you, so you knew that you wanted to be happy, you wanted to have purpose. And then what happened? What was the switch for you? What occurred?
Well, so I feel like, God has a sense of humor. The universe knows what we need, right? So
for sure.
I was raised in a way, and I had learned how to just figure things out. Like, if you want something, you just work hard and you do it, right? Everything is within your control, basically, in terms of like academics, or let me get this job, or let me get this raise, or let me get into this college. I mean, I just, had the sense of growing up, like I can sort of organize how I want my life to be by just working hard, studying hard, just doing, right? And so then I have this child who I can't control, meaning I can't sort of train her the way I want to, or that I thought that I would be able to train her to essentially be like my mini me. I mean, that's what I really wanted.
Yeah.
And that's what we all think too. That's the selfish thought of becoming a parent. It's as subconscious as it is conscious. The thought that, oh, my kid, if you're a dad, is going to have the same favorite ball player as I do and love the same team. And it's going to be everything that I was, like everything that I liked, and then being better at the things that I was good at, whatever the case might be. So tell us, if you will, take us through the progression of, okay, you're married, you have your daughter, how do you get led to diagnosis? Because depending upon you or the nature of your husband, you identify that there's an issue, you get early intervention, or you're also like, nothing's wrong. That plays a balance and everything too, because that is the reason why when special needs and a diagnosis comes into play, if the foundation of a marriage is not strong, it will fray because it's going to be tested in every way imaginable and then some. So tell us, if you don't mind, about that and the path leading up to you doing what you do and how you even arrive at that. Because it's one thing to decide, you know what? People need a life coach. Why don't I do it? Wait a minute. I'm going to do that for special needs families.
Yes.
That takes some doing. So tell us about that path, if you will.
Sure. Yeah. So everything just sort of flowed organically. Again, I'm trying to figure out all the support and resources for my child. Fairly early on, I realized that she was different, but I just didn't know what it was. And I think you guys can relate with me because I have a 14-year-old. You both also have, or Brian, as your child is a young adult, your son.
25. Well, 25. My daughter with special needs is now 25 this month. She'll be 25, I would assume.
Completely different, completely different world back then, right? So I'm, 14 years ago, so 12 years ago, when Arizona, my daughter's name is Arizona, when Arizona was 2, is when, she seems to be developing sort of atypically. I don't even know what that means. She was always verbal. And so that's usually like the first sign that there might be something awry, if there's some sort of language or, processing issue. And that was not the case. However, she just wasn't able to communicate, wasn't able to connect. She just said words, just, to the wall. And so it was sort of this journey of like trying to understand what was happening with her and really trying to figure it out. And one of my sisters, I have a lot of siblings, and one of them who had a couple of children of her own at that point was, called me one day and was like, Susanna, I've been thinking a lot about Arizona, and I just think that she's just different. And I was like, yeah, I know, but I don't know what to do. What do you think it is? And she was like, I don't know. I just know there's something different about her. Maybe call your pediatrician. And I was like, oh yeah. Okay. So that's, I just, I didn't know anything, but at the same time, sort of that gut feeling, that intuitive sense within was like, yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. And so she was diagnosed with autism specifically when she was about 2.5. And from there, it's led on to other diagnoses. She also has crazy food allergies, which I feel like is sort of the most impactful in terms of like creating, boundaries and barriers for what we can do and experience in this life, to be honest.
Sure.
So,
I would say, I know nutritionists who would say food allergies and autism, there's definitely a connection, how you process food, how you eat, how you eat and digest and everything. And, certain foods can actually help. I don't know if that's all true, but I know several who will say that there's a connection between the food. When my daughter was diagnosed, we immediately went gluten-free. Like it was like get off anything that could be, allergy. Right. So keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I get it.
Same here. I mean, it's all sort of related. I mean, Arizona also has sort of the other two. She has a lot of A diagnoses, but like, ADHD also, asthma, sort of the 4 A's. She has a lot of stuff going on, and her name actually also happens to start with the letter A. But so as I'm figuring all of this out for her, researching, working, she became a client of our regional center right away to get services. I didn't find it to be necessarily easy or nurturing. And in fact, it was pretty joyless, the whole process of getting evaluated and assessed. And, it's like you can have an assessor that's warm and fuzzy, but mostly there is not much bedside manner. And certainly in our case, there was not in the beginning.
Right.
And, I just felt like there were all these tests, and it was, oh, mom, she failed another one, and I was just like, why do you have to use that language? And I was just gutted. I was already, what's happening here? Like my heart can't be pricked 1,000,000 times in one day. It just can't. I can't. So I remembered thinking and feeling back then, like there's gotta be a different way to help parents through this process, because it's already, such a traumatic event, to be honest. I mean, I feel like I have post-traumatic stress disorder from that time when she was initially diagnosed. And so as I was learning and figuring everything out for myself, I just started organically sharing sort of different hints and tips and, you know, just trying to uplift other people around me. And I didn't know a lot of special needs families starting off on this journey, but certainly once I did, I'm in the, you know, therapy centers and the waiting rooms with other parents. And, you know, you just start learning like, okay, so let's encourage, oh yes. And guess what I found out here? And, you know, this support and this resource and this, and, you know, I wanted to share everything with everybody. And eventually friends of mine who knew my journey with Arizona would say, you know, I have a friend whose 3-year-old is fill in the blank. And I'm just wondering if you would mind talking to them. And this happened all the time. So I was referred out to families all the time. And then eventually I was like, you know, this is so fulfilling to me. And I would do it anyway. I'm so passionate about sharing everything I have learned and I continue to learn. And, you know, I was going through a divorce at this time. And so I was like, I need to, you know, sort of focus on building business too. So it just is this beautiful intersection of my life and work that is just all the same. So
I love that.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And how do you come across your clients? Like, how are you, it's all word of mouth, or have you been building it?
Yeah, it is traditionally word of mouth. I have not done any sort of quote advertising. You know, referrals are typically how people find me. And I have different facets of my business. You know, I can do sort of one-to-one coaching, but then I realize like it's really more helpful for me, especially since I'm, you know, raising my child around the clock and she's home all the time now because of this pandemic that we're in, and she's 100% virtual in school, remote learning. And so I was like, you know, and I do meet with clients on Zoom or whatever it may be, but I've also sort of reorganized my business to be more of a one-to-many model also. So I created an online course, you know, I do speaking engagements, you know, whatever I can do to just continue to share my story, to be honest, and help other people is, and then, you know, just as energy works, people connect. I mean, you know, Shawn found me on Facebook and we realized we had so many people in common. And then I was like, oh, well, you have a teenage son on the spectrum. I mean, so it's just, you know, energy and intention, I think.
What would you, if and not to have you give everything away, but what's the biggest, like if there's something that's more common than others, what's the most common challenge that you find parents come to you with? Like, is it just total exasperation, or like I've hit every roadblock and I don't know where to go next? Like, what's the biggest challenge that you find consistently across the board?
Yes, I think so. There is a feeling of hopelessness. There's a feeling of worry and fear around the unknowns. But what I think is the most interesting is that typically when parents come to me, they're usually referring to the unknowns around their child. And my biggest passion, which we get to right away, you know, when I sit down and talk to somebody is, okay, and how about you? What about you? You know, and that just really shifts the conversation, their perspective. It's almost as if there's this light bulb of, you know, wow, well, what about me? I don't, you know, what is that? What did you ask me what my passions are? You know, we're just trying to get our child from point A to point B. And I like to just say it's a parallel journey. Absolutely.
Considering that you're, you know, when I see a, you know, a life coach, I'm assuming that just as you're asking someone, okay, what about you? Because as a parent, generally speaking, you're a protector. When you're a parent to a child with special needs, you're a protector times 10, which means that, you know, to your own detriment, because you're falling on swords all the time. That's your duty. That's your job. So what type of balance is there between your coaching the parent to find their purpose, and what kind of, if any, coaching takes place with the child as well?
So, yeah, I don't necessarily work with children one-on-one. However, that being said, I have worked with young adults on the spectrum, or young adults with special needs or learning disabilities, learning differences. What I try to focus on is like whole family wellness. It's typically one of the parents who reaches out to me, and 97% of the time it's the mom who is feeling just sort of lost and trying to figure out how to, manage this new normal of theirs. So I feel like I'm trying to teach and coach the parent to then also be a model for the child in terms of like taking care of themselves and focusing on their passions and their joy and their purpose and their connections. And,
Gotcha.
There's like a domino effect. And I experienced this with my child, who is now 14. And I never thought that I would have the bond that I have with her right now. I never thought it was possible. I never thought it would be possible based on everything that the professionals, sort of said to me back in the day, which is like, she might never say she loves you. She might not ever have friends. She might not be able to feel, and, she's going to need help for the rest of her life. And, I'm like, who doesn't?
You must know my neurologist. She said almost the exact same stuff.
It might be the same person. I mean,
Really.
So and again,
in those situations, then how many of you said it, more than likely it's more often than not, it's the mom. How many of them are still in a relationship or a marriage versus being single moms? One question. And then question two, let's say it is a mom that reaches out. Do you find yourself then coaching, because you're looking at the family from a holistic standpoint? Do you find yourself coaching them? Does that bleed into relationship coaching of some kind, at least to be able to support each other so that the strain is even?
Yeah. So I coach really around like, what are the unmet needs here? Like, where are the imbalances in your life? So we look at all aspects of your life: health, wellness, finances, career, relationships, friendships, partnership. And so it just depends on, sort of what comes up for the person. The people that I work with, for the most part, are actually still married. And I say that sort of tongue in cheek because it's often difficult for special needs families to have the finances, to be honest, for a two sort of person household when you're expending so much on therapies and support and other types of things. I mean, I remember reading this memoir of a mom who, was raising a child on the spectrum, and she was in her therapy group with all these other moms. And she was like, if finances were not an issue, who would leave their marriages? And everybody raised their hand. And I'm a firm believer in long-term marriages. That just didn't happen to be my experience. My parents have been married for 50 years. They're so happy, and that was the model that I had growing up. But there are so many stressors. And certainly when we put ourselves, sort of in the background, everything is going to be exaggerated even more. Yeah. But I will say that I don't necessarily come across a lot of like, sort of intact, healthy marriages necessarily, but it's all a process. It's all a learning. Everything can be worked on,
So because Shawn and I are two dads, right? And we really put this together because, to your point, right? Most of the folks who reach out and acknowledge verbally and outwardly that there are issues are generally the women, I'm not trying to be stereotypical, but men, we tend to, kind of keep clammed up and kind of keep it to ourselves. But do you find that the men have just as many unmet needs and challenges and just less verbal about it? Or is that kind of what you find? Is it a...
It is. I love working with dads. I really do, because to watch the sort of unveiling of tapping into
take the ego, take the armor off, you mean, and put the swords away.
Yeah, it is.
Yes, it's painful.
Well, traditionally, right? There is, culturally, traditionally, but emotion, like men just buck up, don't cry, boys don't cry. And so, and so there is a lot of ways in which we can learn how to express. And so I think men typically are more physical. They'll go out and, play a sport or go for a run or, and all of those releases are amazing. We can't hold it in our body. That for sure we cannot do. But in terms of talking about feelings, I think that's something new that we are starting to embrace for men and specifically for dads. I mean, the journey that I had with my, ex-husband, who is still, a great friend, was initially the, sort of the denial and nothing's wrong and, everything's fine. And, and I think that is that's very typical.
For sure. Yeah.
Right.
I think so too.
Mm-hmm.
We see that all the time. We talk about it all the time. And that's actually what, sort of bonds us. Like, we're like, we can do this. And it's somebody else's fault. And who do we blame? And,
yes. Right.
It's all that type of stuff. Right.
Yeah. I think that's one of the things that it's kind of where this show came from, because one of the things that connected Brian and I is that the one thing we have in common is that we're capable of being, a guy's guy in certain ways, but at the same time, some people will say in touch with a feminine side. I don't even think it's that. I just think it's common sense. Just like I don't like the term chick flick. If you're going to watch a movie about relationships, unless you plan to be an island unto yourself, it's all related. It's just a different aspect of life. And we're both able to, handle the things that, many stereotypically, men, manly things. Like we both enjoy the fact that both the Lakers and the Dodgers just won, right? But which is great. But yet we both have conversations about, but what does that mean for one personally in their life and their relationships and who's enriched and that kind of thing. And, how does that address your fears, your hopes, your dreams? All those things matter, and they become twice as different to face when you throw the special needs component in. So if you will, Susanna, tell us kind of what the process looks like for you. So someone reached out to you today, they're listening now, and I want to give a shout out to Robert Moorhead, who's my childhood friend from the U.S. Virgin Islands and tunes in almost every week that we're on. But let's say somebody else, anyone is looking and they're like, I wonder what a session with her even like, what does that look like? How does that work? Can you walk us through sort of what that process is like in terms of how you serve?
Yes. So thank you for using the word serve, right? Did you just say serve? Yes, I could, because
I sure did. That's what we're hoping to do right here and now.
We are in, I am in service, right? I am in service in a way that does not deplete my tank. Okay. So there's a big sort of distinction there, but every session with a client is different. There's never been sort of the same. I never walk into a session having an idea of what it's going to look like, because it is completely led by energy, the energy of my particular client, what their needs are right now and what's going on with them. I do have some, sort of exercises to help get us in the right flow of, mind frame in terms of creating, a life full of the values that we want to be present in them. I have like a lot of sort of logistical and practical hints and tips and steps, but it's really like, being able to follow and lead and guide from the heart. And to be honest, like most clients really just want to hear so much more about my story and how I came from like the lowest of the lows. You know, I mean, I was in sort of the deep, dark abyss of horrific depression multiple times, starting when Arizona was first born, and then, you know, expanding and then divorcing, and, you know, all of these things that just threw me for a loop.
I'm sure.
And, you know, it had me thinking I will be miserable for the rest of my life. And that's just my lot in life, I guess, you know. And happy to report that is not the case.
Clearly.
So for the sake of hope,
yes.
for the sake of hope, then tell us then, how do you get from the depths of this is my lot in life to no, here is my service, and you become the epitome of, you know, a saying which I've repeated so many times, which is attributed to the great Muhammad Ali, which is that service to others is the rent that we pay for our room here on earth. How did you arrive there? Because it's one thing to have an idea, it's another thing to make it a reality.
You know, I just kept saying out loud, I don't want to be sad. I want to be happy. I don't want to be sad. I kept saying that out loud. I wrote it in my journal. I'm a big journaler. I write in my journal. That's the way I release my feelings and my innermost desires. And I just feel like, honestly, the pain pushes until some kind of vision will eventually pull you. And that's exactly what happened with me. And that's happened to me time and time again in my life, never as obviously as this sort of big transformation in terms of like finding my purpose, right?
Yeah.
But I just kept saying, I don't want to be sad. I refuse to be sad. God, I don't want to be sad. Universe, I don't want to be sad. I want to be happy. I don't know what that looks like, but I do know that I cannot, you know, sort of be effective. I can't be of service. I can't be, you know, this vessel on earth to help in whatever way I'm meant to help if I am miserable all the time.
Can't replace a weakness, right?
Can't do it. And so it was really that. I mean, it was like on my knees, you know, crying in the midst of all these episodes of my various stages of depression. What a blessing.
Listen, I grew up, first of all, I grew up Jewish, and I will tell you, there were times in my life when I went through some depression. I became a fan of praying to St. Jude. My Catholic stepfather is happy to know that I, you know, believe in, you know, say a prayer to St. Jude, right? Who's the patron saint of lost causes, for crying out loud. Like you find the source somewhere, right? When you're at that point of like desperation to change your path and change the road that you're on. So the fact that you found it is so great, and that it became a thing of service. You know, a lot of people don't. A lot of people stay in their misery and, you know, take other ways out, which is, you know, an unfortunate path. And so I'm sure that you encounter that too, that, you know, to some degree, right, with your clients, people who are just like, I surrender. I don't know what to do anymore. Just give me some guidance or some ray of hope. And I don't know if that comes up for you, but I know from a parent who's been there, could imagine that it's the through line that we all share.
Yes.
That sense
of
Susanna,
like
hopelessness.
How long have you been doing this now? And then if you can, tell us probably as much as your confidentiality with clients will allow you to, maybe one of the most challenging situations, and then one of the most rewarding in terms of an outcome, where you got someone from, say, point A to point B. Because I know that's different for each client, but
yes, it is different for each client. You know, different clients have different intentions. I have been coaching for about 7 years now, 7-ish. You know, I would say prior to that, I was just coaching, you know, sort of helping everybody that I could. But, you know, specifically as a certified professional coach and so on and so forth, it's been about 7 years, and it's been amazing. I've had some really great, unique clients from all walks of life. the confidentiality part is a little bit challenging, but I will say that the only time I've ever felt like I failed someone, meaning like I felt like the outcome didn't match what the client wanted, was when it wasn't the client who was paying me. It was someone else paying me for the person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Someone was doing it for them, so the client didn't have any skin in the game.
No skin in the game, and to be honest, just was just sort of going along with it because they were told they needed, and so it wasn't something that they wanted. So I feel like every other experience I've had with every other client has been so rich and so meaningful because it has always come from them of wanting to seek out something new or something different or a change in their life. And so, that is half the battle. Like, just, I want to change. I want to feel hopeful, maybe at least once a week, instead of 0 times per week.
Yeah.
So tell me this then. What would you do then?
Sean has multiple questions. He can't ask one question at a time. He's got to ask.
No, I can't. Questions. Well, Robert posted, which I'll
okay. Hi, Robert.
In honor of service, let's ask Robert's question first, which is, how would you coach a parent who feels that they are somehow responsible for what is wrong with the child? In other words, they act out of resentment. Someone that's taken on the role. We've seen that. Oh my gosh, this is my fault. This is why they are diagnosed with this. This is why this happens. How would you handle a situation like that, which I'm sure you probably run into?
Well, that's a very common situation that comes up with every single client. And by the way, it's how I felt too. I was like, what did I do? What did I eat? Did I not take the right vitamins? And furthermore, ex-husband, what did you do? What did you not do? You know what I mean? It's just, we don't know. We don't know. Right. And so, so I would say this to Robert and everybody else who is in the situation. And by the way, I say this to myself all the time too. So I really had to sort of shift perspective. And I had an aha moment one time when I was listening to another special needs mom speak on this panel. And she was, talking about her child who was nonverbal, didn't walk. I mean, basically, in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. And she was saying, this, because her child was just joyful, all the radiating joy, right? And she was just like, this child is a perfectly intact soul. And so I remember that was such an aha moment for me, because I realized too, also, my daughter, Arizona, is whole and perfect and complete, exactly as she is. There is nothing to fix because nothing is broken. And I repeat that mantra to myself still to this day, sometimes multiple times a day, walking into an IEP meeting, going into a parent-teacher conference, going to get assessment results from a new neuropsych. My child is perfect, whole, and complete, exactly as she is, exactly as she is. And this is how she came into this world. She is a gift from God to me. She came through me. So when I shifted that perspective, I was like, okay, I'm so grateful. And then, by the way, as a fun side note, if my child is perfect, whole, and complete, that must mean that I am also perfect, whole, and complete, right? So then I started thinking of all the broken pieces and all the areas where I felt that I had failed, and I couldn't keep a husband, and all of these other parts of, just life that just kick you down, and then just make you doubt yourself. And I am telling you, just Robert, whoever else, say this about your child, say this to yourself in the mirror: perfect, whole, and complete, exactly as you are, period. Wow. And that has shifted. And then that sort of takes, the pressure off, like, okay, right? Yeah. So this is my child, and where do we go from here? How can we thrive,
Wow. Yeah. So that's why I love this, Robert. Thank you so much for that question, because that I didn't have that question, but I got so much out of it. Just get chills just with the idea of it, because sometimes we need to be reminded of that which we know, but forget, despite the fact that we know. Just like every now and then, this hardly happens, but every now and then I'll see a neurotypical child, or just a child that's maybe doing something that you stop and you'll wish, I wonder if he could do that. Or you wish they could, and you have to be brought back into your path, your gifts, and your purpose, because it's easy with everything around us to just take it off of it. So, I feel like I was going to get into some emotional place there.
Express it. Take down the barriers.
Well,
get it out.
Here it goes, and the tears may or may not come. But the bottom line is, that just means a whole lot to remind us that your child is perfect and whole, and then so are you. So thank you. So the selfish part of me, the other question I was going to ask is, then you mentioned beforehand someone, that wasn't vested. Let's say
neither of us are afraid to cry anymore, by the way. We cry all the time.
No.
The two of us cry all the time. It's kind of crazy. It's great, buddy. It's good.
Thank you.
Let it flow. We let it flow.
We're good, man.
Let's say you have someone that comes to you that you trust, love, admire, and respect, and they have a family member or a friend. And let's say in this case, you know them and you love, trust, admire, and respect them, but might not know their situation. And the person who's in between, the first friend, says, look, Jill, Becky, Sue, Bob, whoever here really could use your services, because they're just so depleted. They are willing to give everything they have for their child, despite the fact that they have none. And my concern is that, their health, and that friend is then going to pay for the services. How would you address that to avoid having the situation that you had before with the other client that was not vested?
Yeah. And I don't consider that to be apples to apples, because with the other client that I had, it was like, here, fix, my relative. And so,
gotcha.
In this situation, there just has to be like an energetic exchange, right? So if the friend was like, no, thank you, I'm good, I'm not interested, then that's just, we don't move forward. But if the friend is like, oh my goodness, thank you so much, I've been looking for help, I need help, I don't know how to move forward, I'm so grateful, to me, you are then opening the channel for us to do our work together, because you are open to receive. So it doesn't have to be like you are actually, sending me money on Venmo or whatever. It's just you need to want to, look for change and be open to that.
It's as if people forget the fact that we're energetic beings occupying human form. Once you kind of tune into that.
Yes.
We talk about all the time that you want to make sure that you're surrounding yourself with people with whom you can exchange energy. You don't want to unintentionally steal anybody's, and you're sure as heck don't want anybody stealing or sapping yours. Robert followed up on the question saying, go back to the part of in situation of a husband and wife fighting over the issue, who's at fault. So in other words, then, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Robert, as I translate, I think what he's asking is, when you have a situation where you're coaching or working with a family, and you have two people, neither of which wants to take any responsibility or is quick to point it out, as we're talking about, oh my gosh, what is the reason with this? What's the cause? What did you do? And there's fingers pointed back and forth. How do you deal with that situation?
Yeah. So, everything comes back to the present moment, right? So what is right now? What is right now? Because when we're talking about how could this happen and what was the formula for the creation of this particular, that's the past, right? That's just the past. And I'm not saying it's so easy to be like, oh, okay, done. We're done with that. We can forget about that, because these are deep traumatic wounds within us that they're, we're hurt. We're trying to understand. Right. But if we can just bring ourselves to the present moment, which is something that I practice with my daughter a million times a day. And that is, okay, so here's what is right now. Here is the situation right now. Here are the circumstances. Here is what's going on in our lives. Here are some of her challenges. Here are some of the things that, so what do we do now? The idea with coaching is that, I am not a psychologist, right? I'm not a psychiatrist. So I, can definitely take you on some exercises down through sort of inner child work. But the idea with coaching is that you're just continuing to move forward. You're just moving. And it could just be sometimes you have to take 2 steps back and 1 step forward and move, but, think about like, in basketball or sport, basketball is a good example. Like you're just constantly moving, right? You're just moving. So I feel like we tend to get stuck, and that is not serving anybody. And so whatever we can do to just honor what is right now in this moment, and how do we move forward from here? Maybe we need to move sideways first and then forward, and then the other side and then forward. Right. But being stuck here is, can be, that's a rabbit hole, and I've been there, and I get there sometimes, the pandemic started and I'm like,
For sure.
No.
Yeah.
What's gonna happen now?
And honestly, like I said, we weren't gonna make this a political conversation, but everything you just said applies to everybody as they're sort of looking at the situation. Like, they feel helpless, or they feel, distraught, or, whatever they're feeling. By the way, on both sides, I think that's a common feeling. So that, coupled with the pandemic, coupled with just, social unrest, everything else that's going on, and it's not just in the United States, it's all over the world. I'm sure that this is a pervasive feeling for a lot of folks right now, where they're thinking like, I don't know what's the future look like. But one of the things that we try to talk about a lot is it doesn't really matter. We mentioned this, and Shawn mentioned this the other day. It doesn't matter who's in the White House, as long as you take care of your house. And so, our recommendation is always getting people to focus back inward, and you can't help out there if you can't help here first. So,
and the problem with it is, as a society, we have for a long time lived very our biggest successes in life, the vicarious ones, which come through other people's success, are bigger than the ones that are real and tangible in our own lives. So as it is, for instance, most people that follow sports, when they talk about their favorite team, you figure that one or two things are taking place. And I speak for Americans, and that's that they either speak French or they have stock in the team, because you hear the word "we" all the time. Oh, we need to make sure that we draft and we get a first round draft. We. When they get a ring, you're not getting one. You're not getting a check. And most people are more vested in proudly wearing someone else's name on their back, as opposed to making the most out of the one that they've been given. And everything around us kind of teaches us to do that. And the only anecdote that's taken place to an extent is still not the best one, which is on social media, people then celebrating themselves. But then, like, the percentage of that's artificial versus real is so high anyway. So then when you put into effect something like the election, where the outcome can and does impact you, but still not half as much as you impact yourself, then you just then throw in, a little pinch of pandemic, a little, a couple ounces of media, and then stir it all up. And there you have your pot. So, that's, again, another reason why, doing what we attempt to do here and having you here just means a lot. And I just think it's a privilege to be able to have these kind of conversations and maybe give 1 ounce of impact to anybody else. And like you said, you teach that which we're the most familiar with or need to learn. I feel like as I'm asking the questions, again, we're exchanging energy back and forth. That's my long-winded way of saying thank you so much.
And you are so welcome. Yes, you are so welcome.
The work that you're doing is so, I mean, it's so amazing. And I think people need to recognize that it's okay to ask for help. And there's no, right, there's no, it's not a stigma anymore to ask for help. In fact, it's a position of strength. And even, you know, Michael Jordan had a coach. Even the greatest athletes have coaches, because a coach can see the thing that you can't see for yourself. They take that 50,000 foot view and can give you perspective. The work that you're doing is so amazing, Susanna, and the place from where it comes, and your love for your daughter and for your life and for your purpose and your sense of fulfillment. It's a great place. It's such an amazing place for you to be, and honor for us to be able to just have this conversation with you today.
Well, and I thank you so much. And I have to acknowledge you too also, because I've been in this world for quite some time, and it is, I would say you guys are like unicorns in the sense that it is sort of a rarity for dads to be so vocal, you know, about their children. And I don't mean not proud and not loving and all of these things, but you have created a platform specifically for special needs parents. And that is the first I've heard, you know, so I just want to acknowledge you both too. I want dads to be part of the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. We do. Yeah. We do. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
On that note, you know, anybody that's watching, you know, our whole purpose of being here is to just add as much value as we possibly can. And then at the same time, we want to make sure that we're empowering people, you know, not just in the special needs space, but anybody who dares to really, in the highest form, and again, in these next couple of days, we're going to really be tested by it, to give a damn about somebody else, you know. Let's get together and do that, you know. So we want to make sure that we've got your information in the chat so people see it. Yeah. And anyone that tries to, you know, that has something to contribute, we want them on here. And thank you for the kind words again, Robert. We appreciate you. We appreciate anyone that takes the time to tune in here. And we got to have you back. Yeah.
Yeah. This is
for fantastic. Sure. Like I said, just 2 dads and 1 mom.
Yep. I love it.
You got it.
That's like phase 2. I'm just kidding.
No, hey, it is.
I want to take over.
Don't be surprised if we call you up and you go, hey,
great.
Remember that idea you had? Let's do that. We'd have to put you in the middle though, so it's a little,
anytime.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Awesome.
Great.
Yeah, you're fantastic. I will say this, and I say this every week, and Shawn has something that we say every week, that, you know, now, and especially now, it's really all about empathy and love, right? At the end of the day, the best thing that we can do for each other is have some empathy for what other folks are going through and share love. There's enough hate and divisiveness and, you know, scary evilness going on out there in the world, but what we can do is control our own activities. And if we can share with empathy and love, then we're on the right path to serving, and you exude that. Almost more than almost any other guest that we've had, and we love all of the guests that we've had on the show. But the work that you do and the giving of yourself, the generosity is so amazing and so commendable. So thank you again for sharing your empathy and love with us, and letting us share that with everybody here on our podcast. Shawn,
thank you. Yes, thank you so very much. Again, thank you to any and everyone that took the time to tune in. As we continue to grow this thing, make sure you let as many people know as possible. We can now be found on Apple Podcasts, Overcast Podcast, and then Anchor FM. And we you know, this thing is going to continue to grow. And just remember that there's somebody out there that just needs to know that you care. There's somebody out there that's you know, I posted something earlier. It was really interesting. It just came up on my stream on Instagram, on my feed. And it was a kid in a karate class. And he was kicking a board, and he was kicking it really light, like barely touching it. And the instructor is telling him, you got to kick it hard, kick it really hard. And he's going the wrong way and barely kicking it. And what was so cool is that the kids were diverse from an ethnic standpoint. So the kid is white. The teacher is white. There's a black kid that's like trying to hold himself back from almost hugging the kid and just watching him, and, you know, and the kid just sits there and he just starts to cry and he's rubbing his eyes and everything. And the teacher's like, you got it. You just got to kick it really hard. And then on the next kick, he snaps the board, and the entire dojo just erupts, and they jump all over the kid like he just won the World Series. And I posted it, and the only thing I said is, now more than ever. A bunch of people responded, and this lady that I know responded and said, "That's my little cousin." And I just thought,
wow.
I said, you tell him, his instructor, and everybody in that class that I love the example they set, and I love each and every last one of them. So with that said, that's a microcosm of everything that we need to do and go out there and everything that needs to take place. I love and appreciate you, Brian, for being able to do this with you. And I would not be here or able to do any of this without the women in my life, which is my mom and my amazing wife. And so thank you so much, and we will see you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in. And a thank you to Sean Hall, who is our producer and tech. And this wouldn't be what it is and wouldn't be where it's going if it wasn't for him. He's not responsible for the tech issues on my end, though.
And Susanna, it was seriously such a pleasure. So wonderful to spend the time with you. Thank you for giving some of your time to us. It's amazing.
Likewise.
Take care.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.